I work out of my house, and yesterday there was an uproar downstairs. A number of my children were playing, or should I say, fighting together, and a dispute occurred. And it was one of those classic he said, she said disputes. And I'd like to use this as an opportunity just to talk to you about how you can handle he said, she said disputes in your organization. Now, I understand that you're not dealing with children, you're dealing with adults. But some of the principles that I used in my conversation with my kids may help you in your conversations. So just let me define what a he said, she said is. It's a contentious dispute in which the parties express opposing accounts of an event or situation. And it's something typically where you're not there, and so it's difficult to actually come to a firm conclusion about what happened. So if you're going to be able to successfully mediate these types of conflicts in your organization, the first thing you have to do is ground yourself. You must remain calm, because your wrath will not help you solve the situation or bring the combatants together. Second thing you have to do is remind yourself that each one of your employees and yourself are all flawed. Now, you have great potential to do good things, and hopefully you're doing good things on a consistent basis, but at the same time, you're flawed. Your perspectives are flawed. Sometimes your behavior is flawed. And if you go into lots of conflict resolution situations with that perspective, it's really going to help you work through the different challenges that you come across. And the third thing as you ground yourself is to remind yourself of the values of the company that you work for. If you're the president or CEO of the company, you should have articulated those values very clearly. And somewhere in those values, there should be language that specifically addresses the way that we treat other people. Okay, so remind yourself of those values, because it's the values that drive your business which are going to give you the foundation for the discussion that you have to resolve the he said, she said conflict. Okay, the second thing you want to do is gather the combatants. Now, in my case, I went downstairs and I think 4 of my kids were involved. I got 5 kids, so 4 of them were involved. It was pretty classic. There wasn't any blood, so I'm laughing about it now, right? But it was a pretty good scrap. Anyway, so what I focused on when I was talking to my children about the issue they had was not what happened, because I knew in that circumstance I could never actually fully determine what happened, because there was multiple points of view. I would get multiple pieces of input, and I really wouldn't be able to figure it out. So what I focused on was asking each child about their specific actions. And the way I framed it was this. I framed it in terms of the values that drive our family, and I asked them, were your actions in alignment with the values that drive our family? One of our values that we try to practice is treat other people the way that you want to be treated. And so that was the value that I used in the discussion to frame what was going on in the conflict. And so I went round and I asked each one of them, were you treating the other people involved in the conflict in the way that you wanted to be treated? And I didn't allow them to talk about what the other person was doing, but only to focus on their own behavior. And what this enabled me to do was to cut through all of the uncertainties or unknowns, which I could never really get to the bottom of because I wasn't there when the conflict happened, and simply focus on people's behavior. And so each one of them went round and they articulated how they hadn't been behaving in terms of the values that drive our family. And of course, I had to help them out a little bit, but hopefully when you're talking with adults, they'll be able to clearly articulate how they've behaved in alignment or in misalignment with your values. And you've sometimes really got to make sure that people don't dodge or don't start blaming other people or pointing fingers, but simply think about themselves and what they did in a positive way and what they did in a negative way, so that they have an understanding of how their behavior has affected other people. So we went around the room. Each one of the kids said something about how they had not quite lived up to the standards of behavior or the values that we want. And that really helped because it just kind of diffused the situation as each person began to realize, you know what, I could have conducted myself in a better way. And then after we had gone through that, we then went to this next step, or the last step, which was to seek reconciliation. And basically, this is what I said to them. Hey, listen, guys, we're on the same team, right? And you know how it is in families. It's the same as in companies. We get on each other's nerves once in a while. So we're all on the same team. And if an apology is necessary, I talked to my kids. And I said, hey, listen, I talked to one of them. I said, hey, can you apologize to your brother for what you did? And can you apologize to your sister for what you did? And they looked at each other and they apologized. And they were specific about it as well. And they looked at each other in the eye. And at the end of the time, they gave each other a fist bump. They weren't quite in the place where they were going to give each other a hug, but at least they gave each other a fist bump. Now, what was interesting about that was this. Each one of them was able to admit something that they had done was wrong. They were able to look each other in the eye and talk about that in a relatively meaningful way. And then they had some sort of physical interaction afterwards that affirmed the fact that, hey, we've dealt with this issue and now we're moving on. And think about how you can do that in your organization as well. Again, you may not ever get to the bottom of some of these he said, she said stuff, but your goal ultimately is to find reconciliation with the parties, get both of them to admit where perhaps they haven't showed up exactly as you would want them to show up, and then have them understand that we're all on the same team. If an apology is necessary, make that apology, make some sort of physical contact like a fist bump or something like that, and then move on. And that's one of the keys here, because I told my kids at the end of this conflict, hey, listen, guys, and this was early in the day, right? And it was actually a Saturday. And so I don't want to spend the Saturday with a pissed off household and my kids going at each other, right? So I said, listen, guys, we are done. We're done now, okay? This issue is done, and we're going to move on with the rest of our day. And, we had a pretty good day overall. Same thing should be happening in your organization. Sometimes as a leader, you have to be able to seek reconciliation between parties that are against each other in some way. Now, what I've described to you here today, I know it doesn't work in every situation, but just think about those principles. Number one, ground yourself. Number two, gather the combatants, get everybody's points of view. Make sure that they're talking about what they did and how they behaved and not what the other guy or gal did and how they behaved. And then the last thing, seek reconciliation. Make sure that everyone knows we're on the same team. If there's any apologies necessary, make those apologies. And then try and get some sort of physical connection between people. It doesn't have to be a hug. It doesn't even have to be a handshake. Some sort of fist bump, and definitely some sort of eye-to-eye contact. If you can't get that kind of stuff, you still know that you have an issue. So I hope you found this video helpful, and I appreciate you watching.